Sorry, that was.
Blank, open mic.
One of my
Sorry, you're so loud.
So no microphones?
Yes, there are no microphones, so speak up and enunciate. This thing is your microphone.
Oh, that's right. And then you were. Yeah, that's why I called it.
Well, and even out.
Yes.
Okay.
So mine's probably the most mine's probably the most minor. So three.
All right, you.
Yep. Talk about that after I read the item and then discuss it. And then go straight to.
I know, it's like, right? These are new faces to me. Planning commission debating all the time.
Small town stuff. Okay.
It's too small. Small. That's a big creek.
Yeah. You good there? Good. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, we want you to say one of our favorite schools down there, you know? So could you want us to just come out and flag them and just say here?
Well, we're not even touching your property.
I know, no, I
So,
know.
yeah.
No, but I'm joking.
Yeah, but we are, I mean, I did do a rough, like, trying to identify the big trees.
The big ones, yeah.
On the whole stretch.
We'll avoid that for now. I can probably find another. Let's go to that one.
Okay. Okay, that's the first I heard of that, but that's fine. Yeah, no, Oh, yeah. Yeah, stop signs are hard to actually get this stuff, but I can go through all that. I wrote her a memo like a year or two ago about stop signs. Yeah, so I have that. So I have that. I mean, I wrote it, I could reissue that to you guys. But there's criteria. Yeah.
We'll just tell you. It happens. I think
Would you read on coming down from that? With
Danny, people can just do things anywhere.
I know for a fact their neighbor is on the creek. It's Alan, Carlotta. Yeah,
Good evening, everyone. Looks like we're gonna do this the old school way tonight with no microphones, and it looks like we do have Zoom, so if you can't hear any of us, just please speak up. So welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for May 19th, 2025. Do you want to do a roll call to establish a quorum, please?
Commissioner
Shane.
Shane.
Here.
Commissioner Pryor.
Here.
Commissioner Isaac.
Here.
Commissioner
Shane.
Schick.
Shane.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a quorum. First thing on the agenda tonight is approval of the minutes from January 27th, 2025. I think that's probably the last time we met. It's been a while. We've had a few cancellations. So, commissioners, any questions, changes, comments? Anything from the public? Go ahead, Mr. Spotsky.
I guess I can talk from down here, there's no mic. Yeah, I want to appreciate you guys, because I leave for 2 or 3 months. I was at the last meeting, then you wait till I come back to have a meeting. So, I appreciate that.
Anything else from the public? All right, anything on Zoom from the public? Julie?
Good evening, Planning Commission. Yes, this is really Christy. I just want to say, I can actually hear you guys pretty good, as Kent just exhibited with like projecting his voice. We are gonna have to rely on this recording of Zoom for our public record, so just putting out there as much as you guys can project your voices. So far, I can hear you very well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Anything else on Zoom? All right, doesn't look like it, so let's bring it back to the commission for a motion to approve the minutes.
I motion to approve the minutes for January 27th.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is public input. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the Planning Commission that is relevant to the scope of the authority of the City of Blue Lake that is not on the agenda. The Planning Commission may provide up to 15 minutes for this public input session. To assure that each individual presentation is heard, the Planning Commission may uniformly impose time limitations of 3 minutes to each individual presentation. The public will be given the opportunity to address items that are on the agenda at the time the Planning Commission takes up each specific agenda item. Any public input on non-agenda items? Mr. Swatsky?
I wanted to give you a few ideas of some things I may be doing here. I'm pleased with the direction the city is going in many ways and changes happening. My Emporium building is rather large. People would like me to work on it. I'm considering bringing you a project whereby I may be putting multiple apartments in the main part of the building, and they would be live-work situations where there would be if I had 4 apartments, there'd be 4 small studios out front. The ideal thing where the people would live there, they could work there, and they could come down and open up. In businesses in Blue Lake, don't pay because you have to be there all the time to sit. Well, this way, somebody could be on duty to open the business for everybody. So try to a neat process there. The other thing, looking at is possibly getting big into the tiny home business. If we get into that full scale, we'd be building in hundreds of tiny homes per year. And if it's a partnership, hopefully to work out with the Rancheria, where taxation may happen in a manner where we wouldn't be paying 10% tax on these things. We might give a 2% discount. Maybe 4% would go to the City of Blue Lake if we work it out, and 4% to the casino. So this would basically probably supplement the city's budget maybe by 50% more as far as income. And that's what I do. So these kind of projects are some of the planning projects we're working on. I did wish to make mention, I have serious reservation, and it does have to do somewhat with land use, but this building in the city is the point of service for GRT, the Great Redwood Trail. So if the Great Redwood Trail gets sued, and I hear there's some things maybe happening, then we get notified here, and we get sued also because we're a point of service. So I don't know if that's directly in your perspective, but I think something we ought to check on. We don't want to be a a pinata for litigation that really doesn't work. So thanks for the opportunity to speak on these topics today.
Thank you. Any other public comment in-house? All right, go ahead, Julie.
Thank you again. I hope I'm coming in the room at an appropriate volume. I just want to thank you guys for being able to meet up. We have, as mentioned in the minutes reflect, had a lot of cancellations over the last several years, and we actually have had way less meetings than we have had with Planning Commission. So I'm really excited to see you guys back up. Danny, if you can make sure this recording gets to access Humboldt, that would be super duper. It is what it is if it comes out audio wise, but I would love to see this commission really strive for your purpose of being a partner with our council, who is a partner with our community. I'd really love starting to tie us all back together in a unit that's working functionally together and inspired together, not so individual. So I look forward to that connection coming back. And this evening is a reflection of those thoughts. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Julie. And it looks like we have one other comment on Zoom, but I can't read the name.
Blue Lake Community News.
That would be me. I'm Justin. I'm ordinarily the one that sits in the back recording you guys. On doctor's orders, I'm having to stay home, but I'm participating any way I can. So anyway, thanks guys. I miss you guys and I can't wait to see you next month.
Thanks, Justin. Any other public comment? All right, so we'll go ahead and close the public input session and move on to approval of the agenda. So looks like we have just 3 items, potential discussion action item, miscellaneous planner items, and upcoming meetings. Anything from commissioners, changes, comments? Nope. Anything from the public? All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as is?
I'll motion to approve the agenda.
Okay,
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. All right, moving on to item number 4. Discuss an action public hearing. Application number 025-171-001/2022. Conditional use permit for the Bottlewatt Watershed Council, formerly Mad River Alliance, for the Powers Creek Restoration Project. The goals of the project are to restore salmon and riparian habitats in Lower Powers Creek and increase the abundance of coho salmon and steelhead populations in the Mad River. The project proposes restoring approximately 3,515 linear feet of Lower Powers Creek from just upstream of the bridge above the confluence with the Mad River to the culvert at the South Railroad Avenue near city's downtown. The project would occur on 12 parcels, 6 of which are owned by the city of Blue Lake. Those are APNs 025-076-033, APN 025-077-005, APN 025-141-001, APN 025-161-015, APN 025-171-001, and APN 025-201-001, and 5 of which are under private ownership. Those are APN 025-026-008, APN 025-007-007, APN 025-141-007, APN 312-161-020, and APN 312-161-022. The grading limits for the restoration reach would be approximately 6.15 acres, and there would be approximately 1.46 acres of additional revegetation areas outside of the grading limits. for a total of 7.61 acres. Project implementation is anticipated to occur in 2 to 3 phases, depending on the availability of the implementation funding. The recommended environmental determination for the proposed project is that the Powers Creek Restoration Project is within the scope of the California Environmental Quality Act Programmatic Environmental Impact Report for the State Water Resources Control Board Statewide Restoration General Order, SRGO PEIR. And there's a link provided. And then take a breath after that. It's a lot of APNs. Okay, so before we get into this item, we need to discuss perceived and potential conflicts with any of the commissioners. So I'll go ahead and start with that.
Before you guys go, I did contact the city attorney, Russ Gans, before the meeting, and he provided me an email which outlines what would be potential conflicts. So I suggest that we go through each one of these, you disclose what you believe it to be, and then we look through the regulations to see if that's in fact a conflict.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and start it off just to give everyone kind of a format. So I have a potentially perceived conflict. I consider it to be light because I didn't even know it was there until I saw the agenda. But my sister-in-law is an owner of NHE Engineering, which is a project partner and designer on the project. So that's, worth disclosure. I also work with that company in a professional capacity. They're not my employer, but I work, with them professionally in the industry.
My property is within 500 feet of the creek.
That's definitely a conflict. That one's very clear. If you own real property within that distance, which you have a direct or indirect interest worth 2,000 or more, would you say that's the case? Then it'd be appropriate for basically not to participate in this matter, to leave it. Yeah.
Good night.
Lucky.
Worked like a charm. Worked like a charm.
I have a point of order. My understanding is Deputy actually could stay in the room and participate, but because he is affected by the project.
The city attorney has advised.
The attorney said different than that.
Not even on this side of the.
He advises best practices for that.
Really?
Thank you, Matt.
The reason being is they can sit in the crowd and potentially influence the commissioners by being in the room.
I understand the reasoning, but in past things I've seen that actually not interpreted in that manner. That's why I brought it up.
That may be, this is a conservative recommendation from the city attorney, and we're gonna go with it.
Yeah, my parents have property that is within 500 feet. It's actually next door to house who's listed on it, but we looked. Yeah, we'll talk to that. Yeah, they are within 500.
I have no conflict.
No conflict.
I got one vote.
So
let's talk through this and get through the guidance from the city attorney. So in essence, you said that you have an in-law that has ownership in Northern Hydrology Engineering, which is a firm that's been doing hydraulic modeling and other design work on this project.
Yep.
So
I also work, with them professionally on other projects, not on this project at all, and I wasn't even aware that they were on this project.
I think if you were working on this project, clearly you would have a conflict. So let's see. The planning commissioner is considered to have a financial interest in the decision if it involves business entities, any business in which the member is a director, officer, partner, trustee, employee, or holds a position of management, or has an investment of 2,000 or more.
Negative.
So then real property, any real property in which the member has a direct or indirect interest worth 2,000 or more, including property near the proposed permit site.
Yep.
Sources of income, any source of income including gifts or loans of 500 or more in the prior 12 months.
No.
Sources of gifts, any person or entity from whom the member has received gifts totaling 590 or more in the prior 12 months.
No.
Personal finances, if a decision would have a material financial effect on the council member's personal finances or those of their immediate family.
No.
Now let's talk about what immediate family means. It is defined narrowly for purposes of conflict of interest analysis. Definition of immediate family means the public official's spouse or domestic partner and the public official's dependent children. Who is not included in immediate family is adult children who are not dependents, parents, siblings, in-laws, or other extended family, roommates or significant others who are not legally recognized domestic partners. Now, what I just read there is from the Political Reform Act. So according to that particular law, it does not appear as though you guys have a conflict. However, the attorney also noted that there is a common law conflict analysis that needs to occur. So they're saying in addition to the statutory conflict of interest analysis, there's also the common law conflict doctrine. In essence, a commission member will have a conflict of interest if due to the circumstance, the commission member does not believe they can act fairly or impartially with respect to the matter. If a conflict is declared, the commissioner needs to recuse themselves and leave the room. Do either of you believe that you would not be able to act impartially or effectively in reviewing this project?
No, I mean, not for this action because it's just an action for a conditional use permit. It has nothing to do with designs or anything like that.
I don't see a conflict here.
Okay. So if the commissioner does not believe the circumstance constitutes a conflict and recusal is not required under the Political Reform Act as noted above, the commissioner should disclose the relationship issue on the record, which you've done. Then confirm that the circumstance will not impact the commission member's ability to act fairly and impartially on the application.
I don't have an issue with it.
I have no issue.
Okay. Then according to the direction from the city attorney, we would have a forum for this application.
Okay, quorum.
All right, so then I guess for item 4, we'll go ahead and open it to staff for presentation by staff and then potentially by the applicant.
And as far as the applicant, we have Don Allen here of Bottom Watershed Council. And I believe, is Dave Farrell on as well?
Yes, he's on the Zoom.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So I don't see you guys with plans in front of you, so I think it would be helpful for you to have them. I'll keep a set, and then the rest of these are for anybody who would like to do them. There's only a couple, so share it.
Sharing is caring.
You can show this. I got the digital ones.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Good, yeah.
It's all good.
If anybody else wanted to see these. And these are the 65% design funds. That's what's being considered. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. I was gonna
Sorry, my
but
bad.
we don't have that capability of seeing. So we're gonna go old school. And I'm just gonna kind of walk you through the staff. Part of what I would have shown in that presentation is a little bit of history about Powers Creek and how it was.
Hey, can we keep the chatter a little bit down because it's gonna muddy since we have no mics. Thanks.
So I was gonna give a little history. There was a few slides showing what happened to the creek in the late 40s when they channelized and stripped all the vegetation along the north side of the McIntosh Mill and kind of connected it up to the Long Pond and really, they did a number on the creek. And since that time, there were times where the city did clean it out to remove aggregate and debris and things like that. And ultimately, it's really filled in and graded over time. And it's kind of choked out a bit with vegetation. So it's a prime candidate for restoration activity. There was an analysis done by NOAA and CDFW looking at this lower Powers Creek, and they identified it as really a high priority creek for restoration activity. Let's see if I can find that one. Let's see, I think this one, but anyway, if you look at the plans, essentially this project is looking at restoring the creek from the bridge that was constructed in 2015, 2016 on Gary Johnson's property to connect to Rancheria Road, all the way up to the South Railroad out in Culvert. And that's right there as you're heading down towards the river outlets just past Mr. Sawatsky's property. So that's the restoration reach, and you can see that on sheet C 2.0. It shows the restoration reach and the various phases. So the way they're looking at doing this would be, about 3,515 linear feet for restoration reach. As noted in the staff report, grading limits would be about 6.15 acres. And outside of the grading limits, they're looking at some revegetation areas of about 1.46 acres. So you're looking at a total of just over 7.5 acres within the restoration reach. And this is anticipated to occur in, up to 3 phases. So on sheet C 2.0, you've got phase 1 shown on the green dashed line. And that would mostly be on Gary Johnson's property, a little bit on the Kirsten property, and then on city property. And then phase 2 basically is on city property on the north side of the Powers Creek district. And then phase 3 would occur, I think, partly on city property, and then there's some private property owners there as well, which some of them are in attendance tonight, that are accessed from Chart and Hatchery and that kind of thing. So that's your 3 phases that they're looking at. Considering the construction could potentially start if they got funding in the summer of 2026. Just so you're aware, the design, permitting, and environmental review for the project is being funded by a planning grant that was obtained by Montalbano Watershed Council, with the city of Blue Lake as a co-sponsor. And that's from the California Department of Water Resources Urban Streams Restoration Program. And they're currently looking at trying to obtain implementation funding for the California Department of Water Resources as well, and potentially the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So overall, the goals of the project are to restore salmon and riparian habitats in Lower Powers Creek and increase the abundance of coho, salmon, and steelhead populations in the Mad River. So as noted in the staff report, to accomplish these goals, the project proposes to widen, deepen, and to realign the section of Powers Creek and remove invasive non-native vegetation. After that occurs, grading and vegetation removal activity. Revegetation would happen within the areas where vegetation would be removed to reestablish a riparian forest of native vegetation, including trees, shrubs, and forbs. So they're also proposing, in addition to those activities, a number of habitat improvements or habitat structures. They're looking at excavating pools in certain areas, installing woody debris structures. There's proposed to construct some side channels and high flow bypass channel, and course and ripples. It looks from the estimates that the project would potentially remove up to 40,000 cubic yards of graded sediment in the creek. There are some other improvements proposed, such as there's concerns about potential for bank erosion downstream of the South Railroad Avenue culvert. And so they're looking at installing some rock slope protection there, maybe down to the confluence with what some call South Fork Powers Creek, with that other tributary that runs into it from the old Blue Lake. And then the design team has noted that it may be necessary to accommodate the proposed restoration design to modify some existing infrastructure within the restoration reach. That would include potentially lowering some water and sewer lines near the head bridge that goes between Broderick and Mondo. And then also potentially raising that bridge by up to 1 foot to provide additional freeboard during a 100-year flood event. And the design team has indicated that the bridge can pass the 100-year flood event, but they want another factor of safety there, so they're proposing to raise it up a bit. As you can see on the plans, including that sheet C 2.0, staging areas are proposed to occur along the southern edge of the creek. The main ones being on city property off of Hatchery, off of Monterey, and then one on GLJ Construction at Gary Johnson's property. The soil stockpile areas can occur in several locations, but initially the city, or the applicant is looking at storing it on city property. They're at the old power plant site and their wood fuel storage yard, or what was. But if that is unavailable, potentially the excavated soils could be transported to a local aggregate processing facility like Prime Construction. So that's just kind of a general overview. There's a lot of details in these plans. In your packet was the basis of design report, the re-veg monitoring and reporting plan. There's a lot of good additional detail in there. But after the restoration activity occurs for each phase, post-construction activities would include monitoring and reporting for a 10-year period. And there may be some adaptive management. Sometimes, additional things need to be done after these restoration designs are implemented and constructed. That would happen during the 10-year monitoring period and would be necessary to ensure the success of the restoration effort. A few things that could include would be like replanting native vegetation, that's some of the guide for some reason. Invasive species removal, if an area gets taken over by it, it's affecting the establishment of the planted native vegetation. The installation of additional erosion control materials that could be damaged by a flood event or something similar. Removal of debris vegetation compromising the restoration design, actually after a big storm event. Modification maintenance of woody debris structures and repair maintenance of irrigation infrastructure and fencing. So yeah, there's the potential for a variety of things to occur during the monitoring period after construction of the various phases. And yeah, as far as what was included with your packet, attachment 1 was the 65% design plans, which we handed out. And again, the 65% basis of design reports, and then attachment 3, the revegetation monitoring reporting plan. So as we work our way through the staff report, the next item is on environmental review. And for this project, we are looking to make a determination that the project is tearing off of the programmatic environmental impact report for the State Water Board statewide restoration general order. So this is kind of a streamlining pathway for restoration projects to limit costs and time, et cetera, in getting them permitted. And the applicant and their team worked with the North Coast Water Board on determining whether the project was eligible for the statewide restoration general order. And they determined that it was, and encouraged the city to tier off of the programmatic EIR, which is essentially available for any CEQA lead agency to use. The city, because a use permit is needed, can function as the CEQA lead agency and tier off of this programmatic EIR. And the way that would work is the city would adopt a determination the project's consistent with that EIR and file a notice of determination with the state and the county clerk. And then that determination can only be used by the city for issuance of its CUP, but also by those state agencies that need to issue permits for this, such as the Water Board and CDFW. So since the project has been determined by the Water Board to be eligible for coverage under the statewide restoration general order, the recommended environmental determination for the project is that, and I'm just going to read what it says, the Powers Creek Restoration Project is within the scope of the CEQA PER for the State Water Board statewide restoration general order. And the resolution that was provided in your packet, I've made some adjustments to it. I had a meeting with the Water Board today just to make sure that the resolution contained the necessary findings for the city to determine that the project is covered by the PEIR. So you're going to find these revisions on page 2. Sir, do that. There's 2 copies. So page 2, under the findings, where it says now therefore, and the first findings are related to the state CEQA guidelines and the environmental findings that the Planning Commission will be making if you choose to approve the project. And in essence, it's that the Planning Commission again finds that the Powers Creek Restoration Project is within the scope of the CEQA PEIR dated August 2022. We list the state clearinghouse number. Note that all impacts are covered by the PEIR, and no supplemental EIR is needed. I will note that there is an attachment to the staff report, attachment 4, that contains a determination to this effect on forms provided by the Water Board that the project is within the scope of the SRGO PEIR. And it also lists the mitigation measures for the PER that would be applicable to the project, because when you're tearing off of it, that also means we need to implement the mitigation. And it's quite thorough in what it requires for restoration projects. So ultimately, the finding, at least under 1A, is that in compliance with the mitigation measures required by the PER, the project would not result in any significant unmitigated impacts. There's also a second finding that the Water Board recommended be made, is that the Planning Commission would adopt the CEQA mitigation monitoring reporting plan dated August 2022 for the statewide restoration general order PEIR. So that's the recommended environmental determination under the California Environmental Quality Act. I'll just read through a few more sections of the staff reports. As far as staff or agency comments, this was referred out to the various agencies and tribes. Basically, the agencies responded saying, yeah, you need a CDFW permit, lake and stream bed alteration agreement, we need the SRGO approval from the Water Board, and a nationwide permit 27 for aquatic restoration projects from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So in essence, they explain their permitting requirements, and the project team has been working with those agencies on those permits. The tribes also responded specifically to Blue Lake Rancheria, saying that a portion of the project would occur within their boundaries on, I believe it's 90 feet property, not trust property. And that any activity like that that happens within their boundaries must follow their inadvertent discovery protocol for archaeological resources. And that is a condition of approval that's been included for the CDP. Otherwise, as I noted before, the city is a co-sponsor on this and has been working very closely with Ottawa Watershed Council on the design process. So comments from city manager, city engineer, and the other departments have been incorporated into the design during the permitting process. Some of the departments noted, such as city manager, floodplain administrator, that the project needs a floodplain development permit. That's something that's approved administratively by the floodplain administrator. At this point, that would be the acting city manager, Danny. And then also that the project needs from the building department grading, erosion, and sediment control plan. So those were the comments from staff and the various agencies. I'll just kind of breeze through general plan and zoning code consistency, because this is not a usual land use project. This is an environmental restoration project, a riparian restoration project. There's a number of general plan designations and zoning districts that this project runs through. But there are goals and policies in the general plan in the creeks and wetlands section of the land use element, talking about preserving and enhancing Powers Creek. And this project appears to be consistent with these goals and policies, especially policy 6 stating the city shall pursue funding and collaboration with local groups, agencies, and nonprofit organizations for the restoration of Powers Creek. So because this project proposes collaboration between the city, Ottawa Watershed Council, and varying funding and regulatory agencies to restore a portion of Lower Powers Creek, it can be found to be consistent with the general plan. So then going into the conditional use permit and findings for approval, as you're probably aware, creek restoration projects are not really specifically listed as a principally or conditionally permitted use in the zoning code. Now, some of the zones that this runs through allow you to use permit for essentially any use that certain findings can be made, and those findings are listed here in the staff report. Also, the section on use permits in the zoning code essentially says you can get a use permit for anything in any zone if the planning commission makes certain findings. So all of those findings are listed here and are incorporated into the resolution as well. And ultimately, those findings relate to, this being consistent with uses in the zone, not being detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare, things of that nature. Considering that, the creek being there as an existing condition, this project would, over time, long-term, enhance and improve, the habitat quality, habitat for salmonids and the like, would be found to be consistent with the zoning code in these zones. Also touching on development standards, those are meant for structures and traditional land uses. So things like setbacks, height, ground coverage, minimum lot area, off-street parking, etc. really they're applicable to structures and related improvements and not applicable to the tree restoration project. So that's just kind of a run through of the staff report. At the end, we list the Planning Commission action options and staff recommendation. Options including approval and adopting resolution number 1, 2025. Denial, determining that some of the findings can't be made and being specific about what those are. Or requesting additional information, continuing the item to a future meeting. And you'd be requesting additional information in that case, and you want to be specific about what that is. Staff is recommending that you approve the projects and adopt resolution number 1, 2025, making the findings for approval and the CEQA determination. So that concludes the staff report for this item. So I wasn't able to get the PowerPoint, it would have been a little more exciting. So as far as the recommendation, you've received a presentation from city staff on the CUP application. And I'd like to have or recommend that you open a public hearing and receive public testimony and receive any testimony, of course, from the applicant as well.
Thanks, Gary. I'd like to open it up to the applicant before we go to public comment so we can get any additional information, if that works.
I guess I will speak on behalf of the applicant. Yeah, this project has.
Don, can you just state your name?
Yeah, sorry, Don Allen, Ottawa Watershed Council. Yeah, we started on this project really about 8 or 9 years ago. And that was with the planning grant that ran through the Trees Foundation. It was before Ottawa Watershed Council, formerly Mad River Alliance, had attained its nonprofit status. But we were subcontractors to Trees Foundation doing public outreach for the phase 1 design grant that ran through, was funded by the Fisheries Restoration Grants Program. In 2020, the Ottawa Watershed Council applied to the Department of Water Resources for a grant that we thought was going to just include the CEQA permitting and go straight to implementation. We submitted an application for a stream bed alteration agreement in 2022, and we received a letter back from the department pointing out some deficiencies, and we kind of had to go back to the drawing board. And fortunately, Department of Water Resources is very accommodating, and they allowed us to modify the grant and increase the budget to include the additional design analysis that was required. And there were some complications there with state contracting law, and fortunately, SHN had been hired through a competitive bid as the city engineer, and because the city was our co-sponsor, we were able to retain SHN as the engineers in the project, and they were able to bring in Northern Hydrology and Engineering, who have the expertise in hydraulic modeling, which is kind of a unique set of skills. Court, you probably know that well from your experience. Anyway, to make a long story short, how we went back to the drawing board, and all this, of course, took time. And we're at the point now where the grant actually ends at the end of June of this year. So we have about 6 weeks or so to complete this grant. Fortunately, we have the 90% designs, and we have, I think, a really excellent revegetation plan. And we have been applying for grants. We just applied to the Fisheries Restoration Grants Program to fund the portion on Gary Johnson's property. That's a kind of unique case because the FRGP will allow you to sole source to a contractor. And because Gary is an equipment operator, he wants to do the work on his property. So that would be the caveat with that. Once we complete this design grant through DWR, they have some Prop 4 funding, and they have indicated that they would likely fund implementation on the city's property. So the phase 3, we don't have funding for yet, but Dave has been talking to the Wildlife Conservation Board and kind of, putting out feelers to see where we might get funding for the whole project. And I think there's a lot of momentum on this project. We have a lot of great supporters from DWR, our design team. Gary is the planner. Yeah, so I think we are, on the verge of seeing this project, the planning design phase of the project completed, and then get to implementation hopefully in 20.
Yeah. They just can't do anything.
So anyway, that's all I have to say. If there's any questions, I'd be happy. I don't know if Dave has anything he wants to add through Zoom, but
At this point?
Did you want to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, yes, we have been working on this for about 9 years. And we've held, I think, 3 public meetings. We'll have another one in June once we have our 90% done. And I have been talking with a stream flow enhancement representative or grant manager from the Wildlife Conservation Board. And he has already told us to move forward for funding for phase 2 and phase 3, which is essentially the reach that is from Hatchery Road down to where phase 3 starts, just below like 60 or 70 feet downstream of the pedestrian bridge at the crossing where the horse arena is. And he's asked that we put a pre-proposal in, and he would like to see us get that funded. So there's enthusiasm there from Wildlife Conservation Board, and also, as Don indicated, Department of Water Resources has funding through Prop 4. So there's interest in moving this forward. We'd like to see the habitat get improved and the flood frequency be reduced. And sorry if you can't hear me that well. It's day 3 of COVID for me. So that's all I have to say.
All right, so if we don't have anything more, thanks, Dave. If we don't have anything more from staff and the applicant, we'll go ahead and open it for public comment. So do we have any public comment on item 4? Go ahead, Ken.
I need to stretch my legs, so I'm gonna walk up here. Get knee surgery in a few months, that'll be nice. Ken Sawowski, and it's a super neat concept and a super neat kind of a project. I strongly support these. I did have a few concerns a little bit. Back when I was, back when the Mad River was flooding, was gonna take out our sewer treatment plant, I was down there with Kernan all night long, and we saved the thing by dumping rocks in the river. Consequently, afterwards, I did some remediation on the section of the creek, especially below my building there, which is the Emporium building where the culvert goes underneath. And that's quite constricted at that particular area. Part of what I think is important, and I did notice it wasn't really clear what you were doing from that culvert on down, insofar as that needs to have as much fall as it can for a way up through there. It has to be consistent, I understand. Strongly appreciate the fact that you are going to fix the bridge, which I pointed out to the city manager, and she said that was engineered correctly. It needed to come up. It had riprap. That's hopefully all going to be removed, because that was pushing the creek out of its boundary right at that point. So I strongly support that. The other thing I noticed, you have some ripples, I believe, between the section of the behind the courtyard and where my building is. And you have a maintenance plan. I guess those will fill in, because this is a real gravel producer. This particular creek produces an awful lot. Back when I was designing, I had permission from Fish and Wildlife to get a permit to actually have a gravel extraction behind the courtyard every year. That was a gravel trap. And I think I didn't see anything of that nature in here. But as far as you're maintaining your area and not having things tilt back in, the things you're putting in, I would recommend that be incorporated there, where each year you'd have a permit, and they were willing to grant it at that time. I did want to make mention, if we only have 3 people voting, if any of the people sitting up here at the dais do not live within the Blue Lake city limits, of course, your decision is null and void, should that come to be. So I recommend that you hopefully cross your T's and dot your I's regarding that. I did have concerns in the fact that The city of Blue Lake is not on this application, as far as I can tell. It states in here a project done together, whatnot, but you basically have no outside oversight over the project as far as an outside engineering firm. In other words, you kind of get a choice. If you're working on the engineering, you get to do the project, get paid for that. And then the normal process is to have somebody else do oversight on the project, inspect to make sure the plans are right. And so, in my opinion, this definitely needs to go out to an outside source as far as engineering goes. Not only do you have that, the presentation being brought to you by the same firm. So if you have just strictly a city project, that's something that frequently happens. But in the real world, when you have a private contractor doing the thing, and that's the main thing on the thing, then that usually has to have outside oversight just to make sure it's great. So those are some things you may wish to consider in this. I strongly appreciate the fact that it appears you're having the next phase potentially after these 3 phases, which is the Blue Lake restoration. Hopefully, is somewhere in the plans. It looked like it's facilitated, but as far as elevation thing, it'd be kind of nice to have just a rough idea that it wouldn't impact us anyway, because that's, in my opinion, the actual functional part. As you're aware, Dave Powers Creek goes subterranean, and unless you're digging down to hard pan soil at a depth down there, your holding ponds for your fish are going to dry. They'll let you dry. That all dries up through there, as far as I remember. In fact, the whole section down through there goes subterranean. So anyway, those are a few of my comments. Hopefully the project will go through. I appreciate the fact that some of the people in the audience that their concerns have been addressed and ongoing and tuned up as you go. That's appreciated to listen to the people that are impacted. I hope they're all happy with the project. I did question as far as taking your gravel and storing it somewhere. Makes no sense at all to go and store it somewhere. You're double loading it, your cost goes through the roof. Either that gravel should be used to have in your project, have higher berms or incorporated in the project, or else it should be directly trucked out to Kernan or somewhere where you're going to get rid of the material. Double loading, double hauling does not make sense as far as anything I do in construction. And we're general engineering contractors. We don't do that kind of work. So, thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. Seletsky. Any other public comment?
My name is Lynn Glenn. I'm both a adjacent property owner and member of the public that walks the creek every day. That trail, so the creek trail is an important part, I think, of the habitat and the real benefit to the city. And I've been in a lot of these meetings, and certainly I support the flood reduction issue because we have suffered the results of flooding several times from the creek, and it looks like it will do a good job preventing that. My concern is particularly with recent developments at the federal level, we've had a history of having some, for instance, trees taken out off of that trail with the promise they'd be restored, and they never were. So I'm concerned with the stage project that maybe some of the first phases where the land is scraped clean of most vegetation, it looks really bare, will happen, and then the restoration won't. If the next grant doesn't come through, maybe that I'm incorrect, but that's my question. Is there any danger that grants won't be obtained or will be canceled? Or is there any federal government involvement in this? Or is there any aspect of that? And also, my other concern is that the public be well educated. I'm here to talk about a public meeting. I think that's really good. It's really important. The public understand how complete the scraping of the land will be, so they'll know what they're looking at as they walk the trail, and a lot of people do in town. So I think the public education part is really important. That's what my main concern is, the reliability of this process and the fact that the restoration will happen, and that's going to be guaranteed.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other public comment? Go ahead.
Rebecca Zettler. I'm also a property owner on the creek. And we have a few questions. One is, how do we give the vegetation plan?
We can get you a copy of that.
Okay. I know you guys have it, sorry. Be great to get that. I know our neighbors, Karen and Marty, who couldn't be here tonight, also wanted that and haven't been able to get it. So
In the plans that Jerry passed out earlier, that you get a copy of them, that the revegetation plan is in.
Is in there?
Yeah, and this is in the planning commission's packet, so that's the report that goes along with it. We're doing some minor revisions to it as part of the 90% design, but it's substantially what is being proposed.
Can I have this?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, that really helps, thank you. A second one, which is tangent to Lynn's, is we've been here long enough that we've seen where people have done stuff on the creek and then never replanted. And we also unfortunately had the experience where vegetation was removed from our property for this project without our permission. And we had to deal with revegetating our own property just in the last year. So you can imagine that we're a little concerned about the maintenance on this project, how our property will be defined so that we won't have that kind of thing happen again. We're overall supportive, but we're cautious because it has not gone well this last year, and certainly in the past where work was done on the creek and then it was never revegetated. So one of my questions is also, where does the funding come? I get that funding happens for planning and implementation and all this, but now you're 10 years out. Maybe the fish are here, maybe they're not, but people always say there's maintenance, but then we don't kind of see it happen. And the revegetation doesn't happen. My son is in this line of work in Placer County, and we understand that you can plant stuff and maybe 70% survives and then you have to go and replant. I understand that. So how does that happen? And maybe Don, you can address that.
Yeah, is that appropriate for me to answer that?
I would probably like to receive all
Okay.
public comment and then address that through questions asked by the commission.
I'd like to respond to that. I'm Karina Gilgerson, and I've had long conversations with Dave Farrell about this project and the history of it, and I actually live 2.5 blocks from where the creek reached its bank and flowed down the street, down Charlton, and then down Broderick, and filled my yard and went into Farrago Park. And this is, I've been there 28 years. I've never seen anything like, nothing like this has ever happened. This was last January. And then December again, it did it not as much. Kind of figured out where that breach was, which was over by Hatchery Road. But the project got stalled. We were told that there was going to be vegetation removal. So, it would have been this last winter, but that didn't happen, or fall, because the funding didn't come through, the permit didn't go through. So I spent a lot of time in the creek, and other people have, just trying to clear out debris that had come down from the storm that was blocking the creek. I realized through this, at first I was like, why isn't the city doing something? What happened to the permit that the city applied to Fish and Wildlife that never got finished last summer? That really pissed me off. I didn't make a public scene about it, but I was just collecting information. I'm like, what are people doing about the creek? What is the city doing about it? We've got this organization coming in, and these people don't live here, but they're working on this, and they've been working on this for years. And then I realized, like, this is our creek. This is our watershed. We live here. So my response to Rebecca is, and I think other people, I tend to think like that. What's the city doing for us? And I'm like, wait a minute, we live here. And so what I want to propose, and I've already talked to Dave about it, and you guys, is like, well, I think that the community needs to step up. I'm willing to fully help organize that, to work with the planning commission. These long-term maintenance things are ours. This initial huge project is something we can't do. So this is really a gift for our community, for this place, for this to happen, because that creek has been treated like a ditch. I've gotten 3 huge garbage bags full of trash out of it, me going by myself, not making a big deal out of it, and there's still so much crap in there. And this is typical of urban streams, you know? But it just like, it really takes the community to have the long-term vision, really beyond 10 years, you know, that we build that into what we do as a community to enhance and partner with these other agencies, organizations that can come in and help advise us, work with us, whether it be Fish and Wildlife, Ottawa Watershed, all of these different agencies, so that we can sort of determine how this thing plays out, including making sure that we're protecting private property along the waterway and working with and finding out what the landowners want and how to tailor that. Because yes, this is where we don't have oversight, but we should be the oversight. We need to figure out how to do that. And I'm really on board. I think there are other people, I know there are other people that would like to get involved. They don't know how, but it would be really great to work with you all to do that for the long term here. And if you don't know anything about this kind of stuff, I recommend reading Freeman House's Totem Salmon, the things that they've done down in the Mattole. Totally inspiring, but it is like, it takes the people that we see the creek, we know how it behaves. We need to monitor it and then work with you all to keep it flowing, to keep it healthy, to maintain it, to restore it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Alan Clark. I'm right down in the Charton. The scene of a lot of stuff comes flowing through there. And has for a long time. So we've been there 33 years. And it's a continual battle. The creek, never getting any help from anybody removing anything out of there. So generally we try to leave it as alone as much as possible, but it eventually builds up, starts choke points and damming and all that stuff. So we've got to get down there and my waders or whatever, the chainsaw, and cut things out. Unless it's going to flood everybody if we don't keep it moving. And we've seen what happens. The last instance there proves how fast that creek can flood and choke. That was 5 hours and about 3.5 inches of rain, maybe 4 inches of rain. That happened that fast. Yeah. And it flooded the whole, obviously, got your place and got the whole Gymkhana grounds and park and everything. So, you know, that just shows how backed up that creek can get. So I'd like to hear something about, in this plan anyway, as Rebecca brought up, what sort of type of maintenance is going to happen after the whole plan is done and vegetation's been replaced with native stuff. It's just, it needs some type of maintenance, at least annual maintenance, where they at least go through and see potential problems. Right now we've got, so I'm on the right at the end of the chart and right there. The city property is straight across from us on the creek right there. And now there's at least 3 large plum trees that they eventually just get washed out on their root base and they fall. So they're already across the creek. One of them was across the creek last year and never got taken out. So now you've got a bigger one that has fallen right at our gate and everything like that. So there's at least 3, I think, right there. As that erodes and all those trees and there's a lot of non-native. I'm not sure exactly what some of those the small trees that go right along the creek and they're just constantly falling and causing, a lot of the log jams are due to those. So once you remove those, that remediate a lot of the problems that's going on. But if anybody's got a suggestion now, who to contact, or with the planning commission, or we're not sure who to contact right now, but that needs to be addressed before this next winter. All those trees on the city property that have fallen onto my side there that are
are just ready to block up the creek if it comes up. So that's my main concern, and just the maintenance, once the project's completed. And a regular maintenance schedule would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'll just add something, because I'm Carlotta Clark. And, live in the same house. And I wanted to add on to what somebody else said about respecting what the property owner's desires are. I've been tending to that space more than just the 33 years that I've lived there and owned the property, but grew up also in that neighborhood and used to go down and take care of the creek bed, even when I was a small child since the 70s. So I appreciate my privacy along that stretch, and I'm excited about this project and having help, because it's been really overwhelming, and every year that those berry bushes and the plum trees and the willow trees and everything, like right now it's almost unbelievable what's grown in just the last few months, because Karina came down with me, and now it's almost impassable right there. And so as Ellen mentioned, serious concern soon. So as soon as we can get onto this teamwork plan, the better. And then making sure that it doesn't just get shaved open and exposed and left that way. So reiterating what they said, and thank you. Hopefully you'll approve it.
Thank you. Any other public comment in-house? All right, looks like we have Becky on Zoom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, for one, I think there was somebody waiting to get on Zoom that wanted to make a public comment, and she was still in the waiting room. That would have been Julie. Just letting you know. And I'm just looking forward to the project too. Actually, we're looking forward to the phase 3 of that part when it comes underneath Hatchery Road there and then connects into Powers Creek. So that'll be really nice to see that finally cleaned up. But otherwise, I'm just letting you know too, somebody's on Zoom. So, and thank you guys for your hard work, and at least you're there tonight. Okay, that's it.
Thanks, Becky.
You're welcome.
Can we check to make sure there's no one in the waiting room on Zoom?
Jumped around. Should be all good.
Sorry?
Should be all good.
It should be all good. Okay.
Yep. Am I not on a lag? Are you guys waiting for me?
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I lost service during your guys' thing, and I think I'm assuming probably Becky chimed in for me. And I have a lot of courtesy to our staff. You guys are just getting the ropes. I would like to say I did miss everybody else's comments, but it sounds like we had a great turnout in the house. Really appreciate everybody showing up and being a participant and putting in your thoughts. I would like to table this discussion without our chair, Elaine Hogan, in the house. And the fact that looking through all the draft and proposed material, I did get a little reference that the Rancheria was mentioned. However, having property that is conjoining with the Rancheria, conjoining with this project, Rancheria has taken exceptional measures in doing their restoration work, and it really makes no sense to me that we're not collaborating with them during this process. And considering the burden that our council has already on top of them with stuff that is more pressuring matters, there is a lot of remediation that can be done in the creek in the way of all the volunteer stuff that happened in the past that I thought was very inappropriate with the removal of aggregates and everything, and got us in this flooding stage that we're at this point. But we could do remediation in a way to get us by for now, and Public Works that I think we could start clearing some stuff in a way. I just feel like this needs tabled. It's too much, and it's too much that actually wasn't disclosed in the manner that what parties have been involved with it, and I'm really uncomfortable with moving forward until we get all parties involved and a further thorough discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Any other, looks like Dave has his hand up. If you can hold off 1 second, Dave. Is there any other public comment? Okay, so what I'd like to do is, I'd like to give the opportunity for staff or the applicants to address some of the comments by the residents before we bring it back to the commission for any questions or comments, because we're not really in a position to facilitate that. I think that's more of a staff and an applicant position, so.
What often can happen is if the commissioners have certain items that they wrote down, like, I'd like to hear more on that, you know. We have the city engineer here, Mike Foggett, who can speak to some of the technical stuff. We have Don Allen from Ottawa Watershed Council. We have Dave Farrell from Ottawa Watershed Council. If there isn't anything you can specifically think of, I'm sure there's some things they'd like to respond to.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I certainly have some questions. I don't know if the commissioners do. We can certainly bring it back to the commission and we can bring our questions out. And then if we then want to go to staff and applicant and do it all at once. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have anything?
Questions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess, I'll start with a couple. Probably the primary one that I had, there's a lot of discussion regarding the relocation of sediment. And I was looking for further clarification regarding permanent location. And I just want to know, because that is a considerable amount of material being removed. I know a lot of people have trouble grasping an abstract number like 40,000 cubic yards, but you just think that your average dumpster is a yard and a half. So that's a huge amount of sediment being placed. And is it just going to be dumped in a pile somewhere within the city, or is it being treated and moved somewhere permanently? Maybe I missed that, but
yeah, I got attempt to address some of that in the project description, and I would defer to the technical folks. But it's my understanding that a portion of that material would be reused in the project. It's good material that we're using in the restoration design. But there's going to be some fines and other material that isn't useful. And it could be used for other things elsewhere.
do we have an idea of the amounts of that? That's what I'm saying. How much material could we expect to be remaining in these places?
We
that
were
designated on the
estimating
plan?
40,000 cubic yards. How much of that can be reused, not known. Until you get in there, because you don't know what proportion of fines you have versus cobble versus whatever. The initial proposal is shown on the site plan, sheet 2.0. Is to do a soil stockpile over there at the old power plant site and the wood fuel storage area. And then eventually find other reuse for it.
Okay.
There's a number of things that could be done with it. If that's not something, say, the council, for example, wants to see happen, then the alternatively, you're looking at a worst case scenario and having to transport to a local aggregate processing facility, which would be far more costly, and something like current construction or that type of thing. Beyond that, I would defer to Mike to answer.
Yeah, and we're with our funding application, we're working to have the transportation disposal go into current engine.
Closer than a lot of projects.
Well, no, there's a lot going on, and I think it's hard to determine what the aggregate percentage is, and that in fact when the Rancheria did the initial restoration phase downstream of that bridge, actually it was delayed a year because it was understanding there'd be a greater aggregate content, and it wasn't, so that delayed the project a year. So anyway, we're looking and speaking with Dave on the application funding for direct load for material. And we are looking at a component or use some of that aggregate for spawning gravels. So there are some called out in the plans where there's going to be some riffles put in, and just walking the bank up by the hatchery road, there's nice larger cobble that'll be for riffle, appropriate size material for that.
So is the plan to process that on site, and has that been looked at in terms of?
Yeah, I mean with the grizzly, and you can again, it's like that upper part you can see, but in the banks, it's clearly fine sediments and all that. So it's going to be limited. So with the assumption, just assume it all gets disposed off site, but we'll, in the bidding, we'll look at a potential for screening out the larger material to retain and reuse. And most contractors are smart. Instead of buying gravel, they're going to try and reclaim it.
Yeah, and then I guess my other was more to the point of what other people kind of mentioned, the maintenance plan. I know I had, when I first moved up here, I worked with California Conservation Board. That was my first job up here, and I actually did some riparian repair up in Oric, right up, I think it's Strawberry Creek right there, the first one came in. So I think we did work on that in 2014, cleared everything, planted a ton of trees, got rid of all the invasive species, made it look really nice. And if you drive by now, it is completely overgrown. Like you can't even tell that we did work there, which is kind of unfortunate that all that work gets undone so fast. And so I would like to see or hear, I guess, plans for maintaining the work to make sure that there's, you know, that this is something that gets done, and then 10 years later, someone else is talking about how they worked on the project and can't even tell.
Yeah, I'm sure the folks at Bottom Watershed Council can speak to it, but there is a revegetation monitoring reporting plan that requires monitoring for a 10-year period of downhill management if things aren't looking successful as far as restoration design. The various permits all require you to identify what your monitoring program is, and you have to implement it. After that, though, I mean, there's not a lot of funding out there to like maintain a restored creek section. There's a lot out there to pay for restoring it. So, you know, what Karina was talking about, it's the expectation that these agencies are going to do, a big sum of money to help reset and restore your creek, and then it becomes a community effort. You know, it would be the city, my Watershed Council, and other community members like Karina that would have to help in that effort long term. The city potentially could look, as Public Works Department doing some of the maintenance, like, Mr. Clark was talking about with certain trees, and the city has got stream bed alteration agreements in the past to do vegetation removal, debris removal, things like that. That's definitely something the city could potentially do because it has in the past. But again, long term, it really becomes a community effort. Anything else you guys want to add?
Can I ask a question about that? And I thought about you, and just in terms of, I've talked with James at the Eureka Office of Fish and Wildlife about he oversees the vegetation removal permits. And I asked him about citizens getting that and how that would go about. And he said, yeah, I'd be willing to work with you on that. Yeah. But of course, I'm just seeing what all is happening and where a group might fit in with that. And the question is, yeah, and since I remember the last meeting that you all gave about this project that in February, you're the one who's doing the permitting process. So you would be someone that we could, as an organization, as a community organization, could work with in terms of those agencies, because we have no experience. I have no experience with that. As far as those kinds of things where there may need to be upgrades or things where there needs to be stuff removed, or that we're doing some alteration to maintain the creek.
And what the city used to do in the past is they would give 5-year term stream bed alteration agreements that would specify vegetation removal within these stream sections, etc. And then they have that for 5 years, and they have to renew. Okay. And so that's what Public Works in the past was operating under, those type of permits. And so there's examples of the past ones issued that could be used as a guide. So
we could work with you. I mean, I'm actually saying here, I'm going like, yeah, well, that could be built into this somehow. I mean, maybe not this plan, but as part of.
Yeah, I mean, if I was doing it.
Because you're in between.
If I was doing it in my capacity as city planner, city, like obviously the council would have to authorize that budget to complete those things.
But we can work on that. So that's an
Dave.
automatic application to this.
Dave has his hand up, so I think Dave could speak to kind of the long-term stewardship monitoring. And I know you've had conversations on funding. You want to go ahead, Dave? I'll let you speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to address a few things. So as far as the current trend with California Department of Fish and Wildlife is to have a 10-year long-term management plan as a requirement for funding. That doesn't fund the management, but it does put the nonprofit and their partners in agreement that they will manage things for invasive species and to make sure that native plants are managed. And as a response to someone who spoke earlier about other groups coming in and doing work on the creek and not planting, and that wasn't Mad River Alliance. I don't know who that was. That was previous to us. But I would say that there is an example of Mad River Alliance or Ottawa Watershed Council working well with the city and community volunteers. When the bridge was put in, the footbridge between the brewery and the horse arena, we planted all of the native trees, and we've had several community events managing that. So that's an example of work that we've been involved in the last 10 years that is an example of how we've managed it. And if you walk across the footbridge, you can see big leaf maple and equisetum and alders and other native plants thriving there. So that's an example. And I also want to address another issue that came up about when the transects were cut, some of the ground crew were misinformed about where exactly they were supposed to cut, and there was an agreement, and that agreement was broken. But we did hire Symbiotic Restoration, and it cost us $8,000 to go back and replant native plants in those zones. So I know that we keep our word and we do good work. For those people who are interested in the planting plan, there are 5 different riparian zones identified in the re-veg planting, and there will be over 20,000 native plants planted, plus pounds and pounds of native seed to keep a seed bank in. And that will be managed over time. We're already reaching out to the school in Blue Lake Elementary. I have one of my board members, Rose Johannesson, has met with the science curriculum teacher there, and they're working on a plan for the school to integrate that into their curriculum as part of what they do. And I've also met with Karina, and she's agreed to be community outreach for our organization and for your community to help us manage this over time. So I just wanted to put those things out there, that we've been in the community working on this for over 10 years, and we intend to keep our eyes on the prize and work on it into the next 10 to 20 years as well. So I just wanted to kind of address a few things that I've heard. I don't know, Don Allen might have heard some other things. I know that as far as the all of the coarse material and gravel that needs to be removed in order for this to happen, we're not doing it all in 1 year. This is going to take place over probably 2 or 3 years in phases, and we're going to sort it as we go so that we can put it back on site as much as possible. But then we're working on agreements with Gary and with the city and Kernan, at least, to try and find places to put the material we can't handle. But yeah, Kent brought up some good points, that it would make sense to not have to load it twice. Nobody likes to do work twice. So we're going to sort it on site if we can and use what we can there. But we are going to be removing 40,000 cubic yards over the next, 3 to 4 years, but not all in one day. So we'll take our time. As far as the re-veg goes, to look at the timeline on that, we'll move ahead of the heavy equipment. So we'll take out the vegetation ahead of the heavy equipment. The heavy equipment will be operating between August 15th and October when the rains start. We will be re-vegging as soon as we can in the fall, that same fall. Then we will manage it. We have an irrigation system designed to ensure that for the first 3 years, the vegetation is irrigated, and we have a plan to work with the rancheria for native plant management and for invasive removal, as well as other community members. In fact, I think Christy brought up that they weren't sure if the rancheria was in support of it. I have a one-page letter from Jason Ramos the chair of the Blue Lake Rancheria, in support of this project. And if anyone would like to see that, I can share that. So I know that we have support of the Rancheria. I know that we have community support, and I know that we have long-term goals to see this project succeed for the community and for the wildlife that it will benefit. So that's all I have to say right now. And I don't know if Dawn wants to add to that.
Yeah, I would like to add to it. First of all, I would just like to apologize to Rebecca. That was an unfortunate incident that happened.
Thank you.
with
You
the
are
bench
the
clearing.
first person from Ottawa to say I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
I've
it was
heard
really
from Mike
unfortunate.
Koga and Gary, but never from anyone from Ottawa. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, well, yeah, we feel bad about it. You know, it shouldn't have happened, but it was an unfortunate miscommunication. So, you know, all we can do is try to do better going forward and try to rectify that. Karina mentioned community volunteers. Dave mentioned a 10-year maintenance and monitoring plan. Those things do have to come together. The difficult part is, like, we have a maintenance and monitoring plan, and we will have criteria that we have to meet in that monitoring plan, including cross sections and if they fill in. That's where the difficulty comes in. If we have to go back in and remove gravel, sediment out of the creek, we've already got it revegetated. You know, that becomes a challenge. But you know, we have hydraulic engineers with a lot of experience in northern hydrology and engineering. We have SHN and Mike Fogut and Gary and Mike Malone and Joseph Saylor, their botanist, which is a top-notch team. I mean, these are really some of the leaders in this field. And you know, you couldn't get a better design team than what we have. And I really appreciate the effort that they have gone through. You know, the designs that we developed under the Greenway, what's their full name? Greenway Partners. It was incomplete. And, you know, when we got our comments back from CDFW, we realized that there were some deficiencies in the original planning design. And fortunately, our funder allowed us to go back to the drawing board and bring in SHN and Northern Hydrology and address those things. So this has had a lot of scrutiny. And I know Kent had mentioned, you know, like, we have same engineer designing it as approving it, and where's the oversight? Well, we do have another engineering firm in Northern Hydrology. We do have the engineers at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, as well as at NOAA Engineering, as well as the Department of Water Resources. So I think we have quite a bit of redundancy and oversight in this project. I don't feel that there's any serious conflict among any of this between the city engineer designing it. But, you know, I appreciate the concerns and the comments. Kent made a good comment about, you know, if you don't have to handle it twice, you're way ahead of the game. I think Dave and Mike have already addressed that one, so, you know, I won't speak to that one. But, you know, I appreciate everybody's comments and their concerns. And, you know, a project like this doesn't happen without community support. And, you know, we are here to listen to that community support, to do better when we make mistakes. We're all human. We are going to make mistakes. Hopefully we've made the mistakes, and going forward, we won't have them, you know. And imagine, so 40,000 cubic yards, that's 25 acre feet. If you can imagine 25 acres, that's a pretty big lot. Imagine that a foot deep. That's how much sediment we're taking out of this creek. That will have a dramatic influence on the flooding. You know, we're greatly increasing the capacity of this creek. Will it last forever? We don't know. If anyone was here at the last presentation when Rose Slauson from Northern Hydrology and Engineering gave her presentation, the creek used to follow almost Hatchery Road and go into what was then the North Fork, because the Mad River was further to the west. So when the creek was rerouted to its current location, that lengthened the creek, decreased the channel slope. That means the sediment's not moving as good. So the challenge for the engineering team is to figure out how to put in meanders, how to design the cross sections and the thalway so that we can move that sediment as effectively as possible. And like I said, I think we have a top-notch team here with SHN and Northern Hydrology, and I don't think you'll get better engineering anywhere. there's no guarantees, but we are committed to this project. We are committed to working with the community. Really appreciate the work Karina is doing and with her volunteer effort to keep the creek clear and, free of down trees. The one thing in the re-veg plan, and, we talked about this at the last meeting, there will be a period where it's going to look pretty stark. We're going to have to do a lot of clearing. We are going to remove the willows that are falling in and blocking the channel. Our re-veg plan will, first of all, it'll plant further away from the creek, except for like the sedges and the low lying plants right in the floodplain. And then once we get out above bank full, which is kind of your average flood level, then that's where we're going to have trees and things like Douglas fir, big leaf maple, cottonwoods, trees that are not going to be as prone to falling in and clogging the creek. So through the revegetation design, and Dave mentioned, we're going to be installing irrigation. We will use weed cloth to prevent the weeds from choking out the plants, and we're going to maintain it. And that's going to really require a lot of community volunteers. So we're hoping that this will be something that the community can really gather around, and have volunteer work days out there to go do the weeding and the maintenance. We're going to be monitoring this for 3 years until the plants are established, and then we're going to monitor it for 10 years. So, we can't guarantee 100% that everything's going to go exactly as we planned, but we are committed to this project, to doing it right, to listening to the community, and incorporating that feedback, and making this the best project that we can, so that there's less flooding, but we'll also have a beautiful creek that supports coho and steelhead salmon. So I appreciate all the comments and a lot of good stuff.
Hold on 1 second. I want to make sure that we're addressing your question before we get too far afield.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
Addressed.
Okay. Go ahead.
I really like the people in the plans, but I'm still not hearing about the reliability of the funding, because nothing will happen without the funding and the reliability of the grants, particularly the grants far in the future that will do the crucial work, as far as I'm concerned, do the revegetation and the maintenance.
Okay, so one second, Mike. I want the opportunity for the commissioners to ask their questions, because we're starting to get into a back and forth. This is more like public comment, and we've had that opportunity. We can circle back around to it, but I want to stay a little bit focused on commissioners right now, and then we'll come back out just so that we don't get too far afield. Okay. Do you have any other?
No, those the big ones.
Okay.
No, most of mine have been addressed. The only one I had was with it sounded like there was going to be some relocation of the utility lines of some power poles, maybe, and sewer. Is that all covered in the grants that are there?
Yeah.
Or additional?
We'll confirm. So we're for permitting and to address that and have the funding to lower the utilities, we'll do that. So, we had a couple potholes to confirm the depths that we know. Based on that, if that holds true for the extent of the widening, then we don't have to lower them, but we're not sure. Because again, it was just based off a couple potholes. So we're planning that contingency in case we do have to lower the both pressure lines. It's a sewer force main and a water line, so you can go lower. And so we are accounting for that for more of a contingency. It'll probably be a bid alternate, actually, that it will have money in for that.
Thanks. And then the other question along that was, what for the residents that have those utilities go into their homes, what kind of impact would it have on them?
So just like we did when we did the work on Greenwood, they do bypass, or you have contingencies for that. So again, the sewer's a force main, so that's really, we have it's in the specs on having the bypass pumping to allow for that. Likewise with the water.
Anything else? All right, so I have a couple. This is directed towards the revegetation. I'm a little confused on if the revegetation is implicitly funded with each phase. And I think that's really important to clear up, because we're talking about 3 phases, and quite often we'll do, these phases of restoration will happen and the revegetation isn't implicit in each phase, so.
The funding assumes each phase is distinct. So it's the funding is applied for everything from the, clearing to planting to the irrigation system. So they're
totally separate. Each
Yes.
phase has to be closed out. Closed out isn't.
The funding is allocated to each phase,
Okay.
all the way through the planting and installation. Again, in terms of the post monitoring, I know the Ottawa Watershed is working on agreements for that. Irrigation, we're planning for 3 years. I think even up to 5 years potentially irrigation, depending on the success of.
Is the
planting.
monitoring 10 years on each phase or 10 years total?
Each phase.
Each phase. Okay, that's a
From
really
when it's
important.
completed.
From when it's completed.
Yeah.
So we're potentially talking about, 12 to, depending on funding, 12 to 15 years of monitoring over the course of 3 phases.
Yeah.
If you go from start to end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and in addition to what Mike was saying, these state and federal agencies also require that you're doing all of these activities as proposed in the plans for each phase. So if they weren't done, you'd be in violation of permits.
Yep. Okay. I just wanted to get that out there so it was clear. Let's see. On the utilities. I just have a curiosity question. Is there weed canary grass on the site?
I haven't seen any.
Ask again?
Is there reed canary grass on the site anywhere in any of the phases?
I think it dries out too much in the summer to
Okay.
support reed canary.
Thank God.
Which is gonna make the reed beds really challenging, but we are installing irrigation,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. That was more just a curiosity. So
I guess one more thing on re-veg, we flew and through, because we've had several outreach to stakeholders and people that are within the impacted or affected by the project. We recently even flew a drone to find the mature trees, and that was kind of factored into our grading. So just showing the mature trees is what helps kind of keep the shading. That's what's key to limit the blackberries.
Identify safe trees.
Yeah, again, except for willows.
We are planting tree willows, but they're different species.
Yeah.
So there was a comment made early on, and I wasn't sure if it was regarding the planning, that there was a grant that was ending in June of 2025. And is that the planning grant?
That's the one we're working on right now.
Yeah.
So,
For design, environmental review.
So this phase of the funding ends into June.
that's challenging. So,
So what phases are fully, I think,
Well, all 3 phases for permitting.
yeah, so this is, that's the, yeah, so the, before any implementation happens or anything like
Yeah,
that.
the planning grant covers all 3 phases, and then for implementation funding for.
So the CUP essentially has to happen before the June deadline.
Yeah. As does, well, working with the funding agency, they've said, if you can submit everything necessary for complete application, all these agencies, then we'll work with you on going past the deadline. They would hold payment, like an agency normally would, until you have your deliverable of the permit in hand. But they're working with us on.
It's right around the corner. Okay, I guess that's all I have.
Could I respond to Lynn's comment?
Can we get Lynn's comment again?
Because
Because I kind of interrupted her.
What assurances do we have about the funding?
Yeah.
And there is no federal funding involved with this. It's state funding, and we have Proposition 4, which was a $6 billion bond that was passed. So that's what we're relying on for funding. And Dave can speak to this too. He's been speaking with the Wildlife Conservation Board. They're very enthusiastic. Department of Water Resources, another state agency, they are also enthusiastic about funding this. Their main mission is flood reduction. So this project fits in perfectly with the Urban Streams Restoration Program because it does both things. It reduces flooding impacts, and it also enhances habitat. So those are two of their goals in the Riverine Stewardship Program of DWR. So yeah, there's no guarantees, but you know, I would say that the Department of Fish and Wildlife, it's a very competitive application process. That one is probably lower percentage, but I think between DWR and the Wildlife Conservation Board, our chances are, you know, upwards of 80%. So I think they're pretty good.
And you're saying those monies would not be clawed back like those, say, federal.
They wouldn't be clawed back, yeah, because it's state funding and it's already been passed. It's Proposition 4.
It's bond.
So I think we had another.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, I do support this project, and I wanted to ask a little bit, and this kind of reflects some of the thing about the funding and maintenance and things. And when you talked about that, the 10-year maintenance and monitoring plan, is that going to include potential funding opportunities identified in that monitoring plan? And the other thing about it, which you brought up canary reed grass, I mean, not that I've seen it out there, but the idea of invasive plant management, we're talking about, we want to address the revegetation and make sure the plants that are planted there are growing well. But then does this maintenance plan also include maintaining Himalayan blackberry that's growing up and all the other things? So I just wondered if invasive plant management is a part of it, and if this maintenance and monitoring plan will include potential funding, you know. I mean, it's a great project, but yeah, the reality of it sometimes makes me a little worried because I've had to deal with invasives before.
Yes. Well,
And they don't go away then. Thank you.
the funding that will pay for implementation will pay for like 2 to 3 years of monitoring and maintenance on the project. So depending on how this goes as we apply for future phases, you know, we might be able to stretch that monitoring and maintenance money down the line a little bit beyond the 3 years. So we might be able to go out to 5 years or more. After that, we're probably going to be on our own, you know, unless we can find some funding, because most funding agencies, they fund the implementation or they fund the planning. The maintenance is, you know, not something that they're typically willing to fund, except for what will occur within that grant period. So that's kind of where we're counting on for this. And, you know, we're Ottawa Watershed Council, we are sticking our necks out a little bit in terms of long-term maintenance, because if we don't meet the criteria, say for general cross sections, and we have to go back in and re-excavate it, then we're going to have to come up with funding to do that. So I think that's a kind of an indication of the commitment of Ottawa Watershed Council and the buy-in from us. That's our skin in the game, you know. And besides the 5 years that we've been working on this up to this point, what really longer than 5 years, but you know, probably going back 7 or 8 years since the beginning. 5 years since we have been working on this DWR grant. I don't know if Dave wants to add anything to that.
I do, Don. As the director of the program, I wanted to say that we have been involved and engaged in the creek for quite a while in the planning phase. And it does come down to one of the things that Ottawa Watershed Council does well, which is community engagement. And that means holding events and having students from the elementary school, from Cal Poly, and other organizations like the Old Crows come out, and all of them have been a part of our river cleanups and our invasive Himalayan blackberry removal times when we've gone out. So it is clear that the agencies will fund for the life of their funding cycle on those grants, which is generally 3 to 5 years, but they do require 10 years. And when we commit to that, we will be working to raise funds for making that happen. And it doesn't cost a lot to roll up your sleeves and cut some blackberries, but it does take staff time. But we know how to fund for that, and we've been doing it. We have a record for that now, and it shouldn't be an issue. I don't foresee it being an issue because we have committed community members like Katrina who are willing to help us organize, and she has her own tools. She shows up and she works hard, and I know she knows people who will work with her. And like I said earlier, We have just started developing a curriculum with the school in Blue Lake. One of my board members, Rose, has done that. And I do want to point out that the planting that was done just within the last year on a couple of parcels was done by one of my board members, Garrett, and he did apologize for our organization and the miscommunication earlier. I just wanted to clear that up. So that said, that's how we will face the future 10 to 15 years. We will be doing it just like everything gets done in Humboldt, with a little bit of sweat, a little bit of tears, and a whole lot of hard work.
Thanks, Dave.
Can I make one comment?
You may.
And I just have to say that fish are not the only thing that are on the creek. We have bobcat, raccoons, birds, all the mammals. It is a wildlife corridor. And so while I understand that fish is driving the train on this, and that's great, we really are protecting wildlife. And also, Ottawa will come and go. But we lived on the creek for 50 years in the house that we're in now for only 10. But we started doing flood control and cutting and protecting property 40 years ago. When our kids were little, they were sandbagging the Clark's property. So this community and the people who live on this creek have been protecting this creek for 40 or 50 years, and that's just my lifetime. So we don't need necessarily organizers or a school. We do go in with our chainsaws, and we do protect our creek, and we protect it for our neighbors, and we protect it for wildlife habitat. And I'm sure those who have spoken already, because these are my neighbors, we will continue to do that because it's what we do. It's the right thing to do to protect the creek and the wildlife that lives in that creek.
Thank you. A couple other comments that I have. So I think this has been a great dialogue. There's been a lot of really good information. I really appreciate all the time that staff and the applicant have put into answering questions, and this is really seems to be a really well put together project. A couple things that I always just like to put out there is that, you know, obviously education takes us a long way. I can look at this and I can easily see what the benefits are to flood mitigation and whatnot. I think the general public, maybe those that don't live necessarily right on the creek or whatever, don't necessarily have the ability to see that as easily. And so I think it would be great to put the two models out there, the existing flood elevation model and the post-restoration flood elevation model. Because I know that, I think we saw it when Rose presented, but it's not something that's easily attainable for people.
Yeah, well, we are planning to do one. I don't know if the date's been set in June, because we just finalized the modeling last week.
Okay. Those kind of impactful pictures go a long way to really helping people understand exactly what these projects do outside of the potential, you know, I mean, fish drive, it seems like fish drive money. There's these other concerns about repairing habitat and other species. Those are all valid things. So there wasn't, and there's a flood component to this that we have barely touched on in the previous meetings that I think would be really useful for people to understand better.
Well, I just had a thought. I mean, I think this was discussed at the last meeting. It was Martin was here, and he does educational stuff with Fish and Wildlife at the state level. And he had said that he would be willing to help with that in terms of educating the community about the creek. And it would be great if we had a kiosk with those drawings so that the community could know, because people aren't. There's not so many people who are going to come to these meetings.
I think
But just some more public out there way to, yeah.
Dave, do you want to speak to that? I believe that's being planned. Dave, do you want to speak to that, the kiosk?
Yeah, I've been talking with Marnin, and in fact, I had a chat with him just 2 days ago. And our funding agencies are very interested in the educational components of this, and we are including that in at all levels. There'll be sort of those areas where you can stop along the trail, and there'll be a sign that's interpretive with a QR code that you can scan with your phone, and then you'll be able to get some narration that talks about it. And Marnin has agreed to help design some of that, and he's an expert in the state, so we're very fortunate that our community member Martin is involved.
All right, so do we have anything else from commissioners? We're good there. Anyone else in attendance? No one on Zoom. So let's change the focus and see from the commission. Do we have what's the commission's interest in making a motion on one of the three options? Let's just focus our discussions there. And those three options are. Where did they go? Yep.
So option one, which is recommended by staff, is approval. Determining that all necessary findings can be made for approval with or without modifications. Any conditions of approval recommended by staff. There is an exhibit A to the resolution, which contains a few conditions of approval, is recommended by city departments and the UA Rancheria. So if you did that, there's a motion to adopt the resolution and read by title. Second is denial. Determine that one or more of the necessary findings for approval of the project cannot be made. And if you were to do that, you would want to specifically identify what findings and why. And then option three, requesting additional information, continuing the item to a future meeting, and identifying the specific information that the commission would need to make an informed decision on the project. So those are the two options.
Anything from you guys specifically on those three items?
I'm ready, that's pretty clear. Yeah.
So I do have one concern and something we got this packet really late on Friday, and there's a lot of information here, and there's changes, and we don't have our chair here. So the question I have is, do we know if Elaine has any conflicts by residency?
No, she was very similar.
Okay. I would like to propose that we have a little bit of time to look at this, but I'm concerned about the timeline with the CUP. So that's kind of where I'm sitting. This is a lot to digest. I don't see any big red flags personally, but I would like Elaine to have a say in this. But like I said, I'm also concerned about the timeline, which is why I brought it up earlier. So
Are there any particular issues that you think Elaine needs to address?
Well, we had one commissioner that conflicted out.
Yeah.
We just have basically the bare minimum here, and there's no way that I can digest all this since I got it on Friday. And like I said, I don't see any issues, but just even with the changes before the meeting, it's just like we don't even have an opportunity to look at that ourselves without just taking staff's word for it.
Yeah, I mean, we should discuss those to see if there's a particular question you have or if you'd like further explanation. It is coming up on 9 o'clock,
Yep.
so if we're going to continue past 9, then it'd be good for you guys to make a motion to do so.
Okay. Well, do you guys want to make a motion just to continue at least to get through 9 o'clock?
Sure.
Okay, so do we have a motion to extend the meeting past 9?
Motion to continue.
Second? Okay, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Aye, so that passes unanimously. So back to that discussion, I mean, I'm sort of on the fence, so I'm gonna leave it to you guys to discuss that. If we have a motion put forward in the second, then
I was curious if there's anybody who wouldn't be here for the June 16th meeting.
Yeah, I don't.
Would that keep us from?
Yeah, we don't know. Obviously.
I won't be here for sure.
You won't be here.
I won't be here.
So then that puts us back to 3.
Yeah.
But you would at least have, you would at least have.
Yeah. I don't think that really, personally think that gets us anywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, there's everything that precludes you guys from making a decision on any project.
I understand that. Like I said, it's just, it's a lot of, it's a lot.
I will be here in June 16th.
You will be.
Yeah, I will actually. I'm
Okay.
not leaving to the 7th.
And based on the, the urgency related to permitting for the project, we would probably try to do a special meeting if it were to continue.
So that was gonna be my next question, is if we did continue it, I'd like to see, that we do a special meeting as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, if you guys are comfortable and you don't feel like you need any further time to digest anything, then I would suggest someone make a motion and we can move from there. Otherwise, let's entertain.
I kind of feel like I'm in your boat, like, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know, and there was a limited amount of time to review and questions that you might have had under a more extensive review, Because I know I only was able to give this one read over, the time that was given.
Fuck you guys, come on.
Dave, you might want to mute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not in that boat, so but I'll be supported. That's.
Do you want to make a motion?
I'm fine I'm fine moving it to a special meeting if that's what you guys need.
Does someone want to make a motion?
So if you're going to do that though, essentially what you're saying is that you're requesting additional information. And so it needs to be more specific than that. Like, I just need some more time. It needs to be like, what specifically are you interested in knowing? What additional information would you want? Because that would be option 3.
I kind of see it as a 4th option, actually, not quite that. I think
it's not, yeah. I mean, usually you need to get better direction to staff so we know what to bring back, what specifically are the concerns.
Well, what we need from staff is we need more time to digest something of this magnitude. And I realize the limitations of the city. But this is a lot. Like we have to dot our I's and cross our T's as well. And to get this Friday at 4:00 and be what I'm feeling now, to be pressed to make the action and pass it, I don't think is acceptable. I'm just gonna be honest. So the additional information I want is the time for me to sit down and digest it.
Yeah, I mean, it's 218 pages. The PDF that we received, and that's now.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that if we had a week beforehand, I think that the conversation would be different. But, it's just, like I said, I don't see any red flags, but to try to rush through this, and I have no problem doing a special meeting as soon as next week.
Yeah.
But it's like I need some time to digest this, and so if I need to drill down and come up with a question, then I guess we'll sit here and come up with a question in the next 15 minutes. But
I mean, if you think that would enable you to make a decision, sure. If not, then we should talk about what availability you guys have next week for a special meeting. That'll be something that the city staff will do as it is, and we might as well figure that out now so they can get a start and then reach out to Elaine and see what you're looking at.
Monday's fine with me.
It's a
Memorial Day, it's not definitely not fine with me.
It's still fine with me.
I will not be here.
I won't be in town.
And then are there other meetings that
Right now,
we could head down maybe 3 or 4 days?
City council's regular meeting is next Tuesday. Other than that, it looks pretty wide open.
So it couldn't be Tuesday?
No, please.
What's that?
No, please.
Fair enough.
I like you guys and all, but that's a big ask.
Yeah. Wednesday, what about?
I'm out Monday, I'm out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
But Monday next, but it's Memorial Day, so I get that. You can do the second. 2 weeks.
Safety commission,
I can do the second.
That's what,
public safety commission meeting the second,
okay.
What's that?
Public Safety Commission.
7:00 here.
Yeah, 7:00. That would be public safety commission on the 2nd.
We do 5.
You do the 9th, and that just becomes the 16th.
I can't. All right.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or those are typically.
There, I mean, I probably could pull off Thursday better than Tuesday.
I can do it Thursday, that's actually easier, I know Wednesday.
Thursday the
29th?
29th.
Yeah.
29.
Thursday, next one.
Next week.
Any other days, 'cause the one is not available.
Oh, yeah, we don't know.
I mean, if you guys think that you'll be able to make a decision after having that additional time to review, then.
And that's the whole point of
That's the whole point, like, it doesn't necessarily hinge on Elaine, but I just.
It would also give her extra time to digest it too, since she'd be getting the packet there, essentially.
I can do the 29th through the 6th, any of those days except the weekends, so.
Yeah.
And we heard the second wasn't available, but
Right.
the third, fourth. We typically would do on Friday.
I can't do Wednesday, so.
I can do the 3rd.
Fourth would be out. 29th, 3rd, and 6th.
Yeah, 29th, 3rd, and 5th. Go do that.
Because I'm just trying to think about continuation of public hearing.
We just table it.
Could, but then we have to renotice and make sure we have enough time. So the 29th is already 10 days from now. So we're actually,
Continue it now to a date certain, you won't have to renotice.
right, and I was thinking, trying to just do it for the 29th. And if that doesn't work, then we would renotice for the 3rd. So if you want to make a motion to continue to the public hearing to May 29th.
I motion that we continue Thursday, May 29th.
I'll second that.
Who seconded?
I did.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes.
Now on miscellaneous items.
Yep, anything, Gary?
Yeah, we always include it on there, but.
Okay, and then, so what about, well, we know we've got the 29th now, right? And so, that's set for at least the three of us and hopefully Elaine.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you guys looking on the regular schedule?
So far, June and July look good. I don't know August.
July meeting?
21st.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, August,
June 16th. I'm not positive about June 16th. The other two seem fine.
Okay.
Okay. And thanks for that input on the upcoming meetings.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
That is always an order.
All in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah.